Governor, for the break, you talked about charter schools and the expansion of charter schools. Obviously, part of the education agenda is giving students an opportunity to leave public schools and use those dollars then in a private school setting or non-government school. Talk about your thinking around those particular issues and why it's important.
First of all, kids are not the same, and the right school for one child will not be for another. Secondly, there is, to me, there's a justice issue involved. Your ability to choose among schools for your child should not be limited by your economic status, and the choice that wealthier people can make either to move or to enroll their child at a non-government school. This is the choice, by the way, that a very high percentage of our public school teachers make for their own children. Ought to be available, we think, to everybody. Honestly, Vince, I do not believe that it will ever be a very large phenomenon in this state. It will be perhaps a life-changing opportunity for the families that do make that choice. But I think we'll always have, as today, 90% or something of our young people being educated in public schools. I hope those schools, like charter schools, will evolve and become more innovative. Sometimes I think too much attention is paid to the private choice aspect of our plan because, well, the bill as it's written has very low limits on the number of families who can choose it, at least to start out with.
As well as income thresholds.
And income thresholds that mean that roughly the lower half or just over of Hoosiers on an income basis would have access to some portion of to direct some portion of the dollars that now they're told you can only go to that school there, whether you think it's a good one or not.
So it's really creating a more equitable situation. So these low-income children that haven't had access to the kind of schools that perhaps more affluent peers have had for years get that opportunity.
Yes, that's why a lot of people have called it the civil rights issue of our generation. Very interesting. One of the most active organizations in arguing for these very reforms we're talking about is led by a young man named Edelman, whose mother is Marion Wright Edelman, one of the pioneers of the civil rights movement and original founder of the Children's Defense Fund. So in his generation, fairness and equity for low-income people in the education setting is, he thinks, the big issue.
Changing gears here, you spent a considerable amount of your time in the State of the State address talking about teacher effectiveness and the importance of improving the quality of teaching, as well as rewarding the teachers who are doing a great job in our schools today. Could you elaborate a little bit on your thinking around this teacher quality issue?
Yes. Well, you've been good enough to serve on our education roundtable, and I certainly have learned a lot just listening there to educators from Indiana and the outside experts we've had. I think we all know teacher quality is important, but I didn't know until we heard the data of these experts how overwhelmingly important it is. By most measures, 20 times more important than what's in second place in terms of how children will do later in life. So the one thing we have to make every effort to improve is quality. Every student deserves a top-flight teacher in every classroom every year. And we've got a lot of great teachers in Indiana. They should be paid more. They're the ones, I believe, who should be given preference for promotions and so forth, not just on the basis of seniority the way it has been. And frankly, not every teacher in the whole state is up to the job. And in the interest of our children, we've got to find a way either for those teachers to improve or to find something else to do. So that's why we're part of a national movement from President Obama on down. There's enormous agreement that we should get away from seniority as the sole determinant. We should have regular assessment of teachers, that it has to include some look at how the students are doing as part of the assessment, and that those who are doing well ought to be rewarded for it, vice versa.
Thank you. We'll be back with more with Governor Mitch Daniels right after this.